Farmers have a tough time. They battle against weather, work in volatile markets and deal with rising input prices, while responding to a climate and biodiversity crisis. This is whilst we increasingly recognise the pressure modern farming places on the environment. But farming isn't a luxury. We need to eat. Fortunately, despite that perfect storm of challenges, there is hope. There are some trailblazing farmers out there who feed the world, and in the process are changing the world. So today we're going to meet those pioneering farmers and the scientists who work with those farmers to figure out how putting flower strips into fields can make feeding the world just a little easier. That's me. I'm Hannah, a scientist who worked with Ben the carrot farmer during my PhD. We trialled putting flower strips down the middle of carrot fields. I'll explain how when we're careful about where we locate strips, these flowers can help increase yield and food production, support nature, and don't hit profits.
But it's not just the carrot show. So later on, we're going to head down to RSPB Hope Farm to find out how flower strips integrate into cereal fields. But first, let's jump into this net zero carrot field. So Ben, what makes this carrot field so special?
So this carrot field is our net zero carrot field. We've tried different cultivation techniques to reduce, obviously, as carbon emissions, along with different fertiliser applications.
How many carrots are in this field?
There'll be about, 24 million?
Ben's carrot fields might look pretty, but if you dig into them, a problem lurks beneath. Aphids can transmit viruses to carrots. These virus-damaged carrots can be unmarketable and reduce crop yield. Farmers want to stop relying on insecticides to control aphids. One solution can be a process called conservation biological control. This works as flower strips support natural enemies which can then move into the fields and control pests. In my PhD, I investigated what was the best combination of flowers to plant to encourage conservation biological control, and where was the best place to put those flower strips. Over 3 years of commercial trials, I didn't find any evidence that one flower mix performed best. But I did find that where farmers put flower strips matters. When flower strips run along the middle of a field, for the first 20 to 30 metres, the yield of the carrots next to the strip is about 40% higher than if there were no flowers planted. This 20 tonnes per hectare yield increase is indirectly associated with the pest control services from natural enemies. This increase is also big enough to offset the food production lost from the footprint of land taken out by the strips. And the extra yield can pay for the costs of the flowers too. But when we go further into the field, the balance is no longer in favour of the flower strips. The yield benefit from the strips reduces and can no longer offset food production or costs. This is because the yield is already so high that there isn't much for the flower strips to improve upon. Year to year, there will be natural variation in this balance between flower strips, associated yield increases, and their impacts on food production and costs. Clearly, the next step would be to study how this balance varies in more carrot fields across the UK. But in the meantime, the key message is that when farmers think carefully about where they place their flower strips, it is possible to find harmony between food production, business costs, and supporting nature.
How do you find these flower strips fit in? Obviously, we're taking land out of production. It means challenges for your machinery. How do you fit them into the crop and the rotation?
Yeah, it probably does take a bit more thinking about how you're setting your fields out to put the flower strips in, but in the end, on the grand scheme of things, you're not really losing much ground or it's any detriment to yield. But for what benefit you're gaining with the biodiversity, it outweighs that for us anyway, for myself and the business.
Yeah. Whilst we've just talked about my research project, I didn't come up with the concept of flower strips, and they aren't only useful in carrot fields. This is John, one of my PhD supervisors who I worked with at Rothamsted. John leads a project called Assist that's studying how flower strips fit into cereal fields. We're here today on RSPB Hope Farm to meet him and Georgie, the farm's manager, to find out how flower strips can help increase the sustainability of cereal farms.
So
So I'm Dr. Jonathan Storkey. I work at Rothamsted Research as an agroecologist, and that means taking what we know about ecology and how ecology works and implementing it in agricultural systems.
So what is ASSIST, John?
ASSIST is a large 10 or 11 year project that's been running since 2016, and it's been a joint project between 3 institutes: Rothamsted Research, the UK Centre for Ecology and Hydrology, and the British Geological Survey. And we've all been working together to understand the potential contribution of nature to supporting crop production and ways that we can change the way we farm to reduce the negative impact of farming operations on nature and the services it provides to us.
Why are you here on Hope Farm today?
So we're doing our annual vegetation survey. We come out here every year and we record the flowering species in each of the infield strips and the margins on the edge, and we compare that to other sites and see how it is changing over time. There are lots of different terms that are used to describe these kinds of farming systems: agroecological, regenerative, perhaps sustainable intensification, nature-based, but they all largely have the same ingredients. One of those ingredients is getting more diversity of habitats onto the farm, and that's what we're doing with these flowering strips.
You used some technical terms there. Do you think if you're a farmer, understanding these different terms matters?
Not really, as long as you understand the basic principles behind them. One of those principles is just getting more diversity back onto your farm in terms of cropping and habitat. Another one is thinking about your soils and getting more organic matter into the soils. Perhaps thinking about your landscape and where you put those semi-natural habitats so that we can provide that regulation of pest populations by the natural enemies. So the basic principles are not that complicated, but thinking about how you implement them on your farm is obviously a bit more challenging.
So I've not had a chance to meet you yet, Georgie, so thank you so much for having me here at Hope Farm. Can you tell me what's so special about this place, because it's looking pretty cool today?
So I'm Georgie, I'm the farm manager here at Hope Farm, which is an RSPB owned farm, and the bread and butter of what we do here is try and demonstrate that you can farm with nature and run a sustainable business at the same time. And then later on it's evolved to not just being, okay, you can have nature and you can have farming, but showing that the two are really intrinsically linked.
What I think is quite cool about Hope Farm is that you've got all of this nature going on, but you're also still a commercial farm. How have you built these flower strips into your commercial system?
For us, they're a fundamental part of our strategy to have a no insecticide system. There's obviously a lot more research to be done on them, which is why it's great that we've been hosting the ASSIST trial here. But from what we can glean so far, we see hoverflies using them, ladybirds using them, loads of different things using them, where we can see how that would be useful for pest control in the crop. Farming has unfortunately become way over reliant on pesticides, and we still use pesticides here. We're not organic, but we really don't want to be using insecticides in the future for the potential damage or the real damage that they're causing to the wider environment. If we tried to go down that whole reducing our input system without having those habitats, it would be much harder and much higher risk.
Are you having to worry about machinery widths, all of that kind of stuff?
Yeah, exactly. It's taken a lot of planning to try and figure out a way where this can work in an arable system.
Yeah.
So the strips, they're 24 metres wide, and we've got the headland around the edge as well, so that it fits in with our contractors' drills, which are 6 metres, and the sprayer can fit in at 24 metres as well. Word direct from contractor is that it makes the turning circle a bit easier. I don't see why any farmer shouldn't be doing that. It's relatively simple measures that we can do. We need to have a massive cultural change on our hedgerow management. But there are already loads of farmers who are doing those key measures and doing so much more. So there's a ton of hope there, and there's a ton of farmers who are leading the way in that.
This video started with a bold claim that farmers are both feeding and changing the world. Now that might seem a bit ridiculous, because after all, what does growing a carrot have to do with tackling the vast challenges of biodiversity loss and climate change? Well, humans need to eat, and farmers provide us with that food. So this gives farmers a unique opportunity to farm in ways that both helps nature, helps their profits, and helps feed us. Hopefully, you'll also have spotted that when farmers work in partnership with scientists who can give them the rigorous understanding of what's going on in their fields, this is a powerful partnership. Of course, flower strips aren't the single solution for sustainable farming. But projects like My PhD and Assist can show that when we work together, we find solutions. Solutions like these flower strips.
In a world that can seem increasingly conflicted, to me, it feels like farmers can take steps that might once have seemed bold, but are now increasingly backed by sensible evidence. Evidence that rises above tension between food production, profit, and the environment, showing that when farmers take the right action,
They really can feed the world and change the world.